listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
How significant is singing the Psalms in the life of the congregation? If you're not singing the Psalms, are you missing out on something? We're going to talk about that today. And we'll also be discussing the upcoming Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music taking place this summer at Concordia University, Nebraska. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting the Coffee Hour. You can find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, Dr. Charles Brown, professor of music and chair of the Arts Division at Concordia University, Chicago. He's also a keynote speaker at the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music taking place July 9th through 12th from the LCMS Office of National Mission. It is taking place at Concordia University, Nebraska. Dr. Charles Brown, welcome back to the Coffee Hour.
Well, it's so wonderful to be back. Thanks for asking me to spend some time with you today.
We always love talking church music with you. And today we get to dig into a beautiful subject. We're talking about the Psalms and singing the Psalms, which is really the essence, the theme of the Institute this summer. In what ways, from your perspective, are the Psalms accessible for congregational singing? Because there are lots of different ideas and approaches to what the congregation sings today or what music is used in congregations, but particularly the Psalms. What makes them accessible for congregational singing?
Wow. Well, had to think about this a little bit because there are so many directions I could take. And so in what ways are they accessible? So first of all, it's within the design of the worship, the liturgy. I mean, this goes back all the way to the early church we don't want to go back to the 4th century, but actually it was even in the early church where the Psalms are really noted as being sung in worship, whether it was underground, in secret and hiding, but there were records of that. But to the current day, we're talking about how do we handle this? How do we express this book of songs that God has given us? You ever hear that we're baptized now? What? There's so many. So first of all, it's just the process of singing. We'll start with that. The hymnal is really well designed for our use in that regard. You could just open the front section. There are chant formula. You don't even have to be stuck with that. I've even heard congregations where they're just chanting on one tone the entire psalm. So they'll take turns between either the pastor would sing a verse, they would respond a verse, just on one tone. So, like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And then they just sing all the way through. I heard a Psalm 22 done once on a Maundy Thursday. That one tone, the entire psalm. That's a story for another time. But you can have alternated with soloists in the congregation and also choir. So there's a lot of versatility. We have a lot of resources in our church body, in the church music realm, where there are antiphons, so the congregation could come back to that, either in the choir, in the congregation. And it's just really a wonderful opportunity for people just orbiting Christ and singing praises, singing comfort songs, because we needed that a lot in Lent. So throughout the liturgy, the whole life of the church, we have so many emotions to express. And there's many ways that I would say that we can just center in. And I'm not saying to go for that aspect alone, just saying, I just need to be centered in and be all, right with the world, because that's not the way the world works. It's just that God's giving us this time together to really focus on what matters.
What makes singing the Psalms unique as opposed to speaking them? What is that added benefit? Because we're talking about singing the Psalms.
Right.
What is the added benefit of chanting them, even if you're chanting them on one note? What does that gain? What does that gain you? That's bad English. But what does that benefit?
I had to think about that because when presenting this summer, I have to be talking about this. And I thought, well, what about my own devotional life? So I should start there. How do I actually do this in my own daily life? Because I thought, okay, if you're at home doing your own personal devotions, it's quiet. You just read silently. Or you might read it and speak it out loud. or that you might sing it. So when I have done all three, so first of all, the reading silently, you just don't, it's just not internalized. You just take it in through the eyes, and a plethora of maybe random thoughts will occur while you're reading. And that doesn't really focus much. Reading out loud is okay because it's still an expression, because you're actually then being caught in a word or something. But when you actually breathe and sing, I've noticed a difference. So when if I take the chant formula, and so the opening, if there's a tune that actually matches the character of the psalm, if it's a song of praise, then all of a sudden so that I find that there's something that's a little bit more joyful or a little bit more impactful that psalm tone might match. Or if there's something that's Lenten, so I've got that kind of character that if I'm singing that in my own personal devotional life, I'm finding that actually lasts a little bit longer in the day, where I'm mindful of the words. Where if I were to transfer this learning besides just the Psalms, like why do we teach the times tables through a song? Because people retain the information a little bit longer, because you're actually accessing both hemispheres of your brain. But in the better aspect of it, when we're singing the Psalms, it's actually connecting, because the Holy Spirit is active in the word. And then in singing, I think it goes a little deeper.
Would it be appropriate to use the phrase fully engaged? Like singing the Psalms brings
Absolutely.
us fully engaged with the word when we're singing God's word.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, reading it silently is one thing, reading it aloud is another, singing it is a whole nother level in which perhaps we're fully engaged.
That's right. Now that goes to the topic of singing then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So because one thing is when we're singing it, people get insecure these days about singing. We could go, where has singing been? Where is singing now? Where is it headed? Here's the part where I wonder, am I going to go down a rabbit hole talking about a certain topic, recorded music?
Oh.
Because right now our society is really reliant upon passive music making.
Mm-hmm.
We play something, we know it sounds good, and you'd prefer that and go, well, I can't sing like that. So I bet you there are going to be a lot of listeners who go, yeah, I'd rather have somebody else sing it for me. And that's valid in its own way, because people are touched because somebody is singing it really well. So the question is that person fully engaged? I would say yes. But are we really taking the courage of joining in the song to be fully engaged in that manner? When people get together to sing, when they're breathing together at the same time to enter a phrase of music, they're fully engaged. And I think it goes a little bit deeper than just the aspect of breathing, because that today we actually are just breathing, that God has given us life to breathe today. But more importantly, and I think of Genesis, when God has given Adam ruach, where his breath, in the breath, the Spirit is given. And so that's a gift. That gift is given to us. And when we actually are breathing together and singing the Psalms, I think it goes a lot deeper than just singing.
Yeah, it's making me think of like this mind, body, spirit aspect of the being engaged in something, and what happens when you're singing, whether by yourself or with somebody else, the different way that we process what we're doing when something is actually being sung out loud, and how it's a prayer, but it's also, asking for God's protection. All these things. Speaking of rabbit holes, there's so many ways. Singing things out loud is it's a different level of experiencing God's word in our life.
That's right. And so the danger here that I want to caution is about feelings, because if we go after the feelings, I'll tell you, there are times when I'm preparing for worship, because first of all, first warning, don't wing worship. We've got to be prepared for it. And so we're practicing, we're thinking the technical aspects, but then we think about, okay, are we really, are our hearts and minds and spirits really into this when we're approaching this in worship? Because there are a lot of distractions that happen just getting worship going for everybody. And so I wish I could say, at every worship service, I'm ready to go. I have it all. It's all down, and I'm just all is right with God and the world, and there's nothing like it. There are days when I've experienced that, yes, but there are days when I'm just like, I just hope, pray, God, get me through this, because there are too many distractions in the day, and I just praying for just being faithful in serving the people on that given day.
What else is unifying about a congregation singing the Psalms together? We've kind of touched on the breathing together aspect of it, but what else is unifying about doing these Psalms together?
Well, it's part of the pattern, right? If they know what to expect, there's a stability in the worship life. Hopefully, if it's impactful enough, people will actually talk about it afterward, like maybe over their own coffee, worship fellowship time. After the worship, they'll say, "What about that text? Can we talk about that?" Or because the danger is when we sing psalm settings, we don't really talk about how it went, except for those who are really in the middle of it. And so our people say, that was beautiful. They may not know what to say. That was actually beautiful, but they know it was good. And they could talk about those things. And hopefully, because if the music is good, then they're open to the theology of it. And then we could talk about those things that matter. And when we speak to one another with psalms and spiritual songs, thanking God and praise, I'm taking the verse out of context here. When we think about how God has blessed us, this is our diet. This is when we're really eating this diet, and we're sharing it with one another. That's another unifying aspect, in my opinion, about how the Psalms are for our good and for everybody.
We're learning about singing the Psalms today, looking forward to the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music taking place July 9th through 12th at Concordia University, Nebraska. We have more to talk about with Dr. Brown in just a moment. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
At Concordia University, Wisconsin, we believe you were created for a reason: to use your God-given gifts to help others, to live a life of self-sacrifice in a me-first world, to live a life that's uncommon. Whether you're taking one of 50-plus online programs or learning with us in person on the shores of Lake Michigan, you'll be equipped to make an uncommon impact. Learn more at cuw.edu. Concordia University, Wisconsin. Live uncommon.
Sharing our faith can sometimes be hard, especially face-to-face. That's one of the reasons KFUO is here, to share God's Word globally on your behalf and to equip you with the knowledge, confidence, and words to share Jesus yourself. This Share-a-thon, make a gift to KFUO Radio so we can continue sharing Christ to the world. Donate online at kfuo.org/shareathon. That's kfuo.org/shareathon.
Welcome back to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
We are talking about singing the Psalms with Dr. Charles Brown, looking forward to the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music taking place at Concordia University, Nebraska, July 9th through 12th, hosted by the LCMS Office of National Mission. So we've been talking about the ways that the Psalms are accessible, what's unifying about it, why it's important for congregations to sing the Psalms together. What happens if we're not singing the Psalms? Are we missing out on something as a congregation if we're not singing the Psalms together?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we wouldn't be missing out on anything because there's power of the word. Mm-hmm. And so with that, we're actually, even if we're just speaking it responsively, that's still a connection. But it comes down to, let's use the plane ride analogy. It's like when you go from economy to first class. In some ways I would kind of pattern it like that, because there are a lot of benefits to it. And right now there are probably people in their congregations who go through the 50-50 route, there's a wonderful book or it's a manual on the pastor's chant by M. Alfred Bixel, and it's housed in our Center for Church Music here. And it came around the time when LW was being introduced, because up at that point, the congregation would read the pastor's chant text. Sometimes the pastors would chant it or they would speak it, but then there would be the response musically for the congregation. So it'd be like, pastor reads the text, the congregation sings. But in the earlier church, it was more common that the pastor would sing and the congregation also would respond in singing. So we've kind of fell into that pattern. And especially right around the turn of the 20th century, when congregations went from German speaking to English speaking, there are pastors who sang it in German. And then when things became more English, how do we do this? And it's the patterns, the psalm tones, all those things became a little bit more uncomfortable, let's just say. So they're like, okay, default, let's go to English. And then the pastor would normally speak it. But then the congregation's like, okay, we're going to keep singing. And so by the time LW came around, you would see more of the pastor's chant and the congregational chant. And yet the pastor would still speak the text out loud. So, and then there are pastors who will chant and maybe not feel comfortable singing. They're like, I don't know if I really should be. Or there's some who say, I am, even though they shouldn't. And that's another discussion. And I guess I went there, and I have another topic to discuss about that very subject momentarily. But what do we do, right? when we're looking at, okay, if we're going to do it, let's do it well. And that's the benefit. If we're really saying, look, this matters, let's do it. So now, should I go there?
Go there.
Okay. So let's say that, first of all, philosophically, I want to give people a fighting chance to do it well. And if there are people who are, let's call it tone deaf. I grew up Catholic, and I had a priest who sang really well, and there was a priest who just didn't. But he encouraged me to continue on in music. And he sang, and it was tone deaf, but he somehow praised, and but the congregation was used to it. And we just loved him, and we just sang still, because the congregation sang, because that was the time in history where people just sang a lot more. So, but now we're getting more and more common in not singing. And that's the part that I kind of am sad about, but I also want to say, let's say that this matters. Let's encourage people, because there are scientific reports about, it's called the incompetent singer. And what are some of the root causes? One is that just singing isn't as prevalent. Make it as commonplace as TGI Fridays singing happy birthday. And we understand how that goes. But people in congregations are really singing with fervor. And I'm hearing more and more congregations with that in mind. It's really going well. And so, but there are still pastors who say, I want to sing. Can you listen to me? Like, I have some pre-sent majors who come to me and they say, help me out. And I'll spend time and get them so they're leading the liturgy. And so I really get excited about that. And I think that needs to be more of a preparation for people who want to go into the ministry. And if there are people who don't sing but want a fighting chance, I'm also having a session at the Institute this summer where there are people who want to tune up, or there are people saying, can I sing? And I'll take the time. And I think it's a very intimate thing, and it's a vulnerable thing for people to say, this matters and I want to be better at it. Could you listen to me? I thank God that he's given me that opportunity to listen to people over time, and without judging, and just saying, okay, this sounds good. This is what I would like to do with you. Or even give a suggestion saying, let's find the common pitch here. And maybe we could work with this and say, this would probably be your way to go forward in your congregation.
I think that's a really important point that you're bringing up, though, that deciding intentionally that this matters in a congregation, I think is a very important place to start. That if something is important to you, then you're going to work at it, work to make it work through some of maybe the awkwardness that happens when you're in a transition phase of maybe doing something new. But talking about psalms and chanting them and the simplicity of some of those psalm tones, How does chanting psalms in these simple ways encourage congregations to sing together in a way that maybe more complicated hymn tunes may not?
Right. Well, I mean, you could just start there because, say, for a season, you just had that one. Well, I have to be careful when I say this because it's like eating the same cereal for 3 months in a row, right? It's just because we have a lot of psalm tones that match a technical or an expressive mood. I should say, let's go with the expressive aspect. Let's say if in a month you just have, it's the psalm chant tone for the month, and then the next month you change it up. You just keep it that simple. Or you say the congregation just needs to sing that one tone, and or the organist has a chord progression that supports that one tone. And so everybody is just getting a method down because it's really about repetition. And that's the nice thing about the liturgy. We have 1 week to the next of just being together, and we just get that pattern down. Because it really is, because ultimately, how do I say this? That we are not in service to the music. We're a servant to the music. It's on me to make sure the music is done well. But ultimately, it is in response to God's gifts, but it's in service to the congregation, saying that we are here to celebrate what God has done. And so if we can actually just focus in on that pattern, focus in on that simple psalm text, that simple psalm tone. How does this work? And it's a beautiful thing to witness. And then by then the congregation gets a little bit more into it, where they're singing the chorale tunes, the early, Martin Luther tunes, like from depths of, oh, I cry to thee. And then I did this on a tour where I took from the Liederbuch, the chorale tune of Psalm 130, and then we did a Tizé. And we also could have probably just done a psalm tone of that as well. But the world's our oyster when it comes to choral music, to hymnody, to psalm tones. Well, there's really no limits.
You will be a keynote speaker at the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music that takes place this July at Concordia University, Nebraska. What are you looking forward to as you gather with fellow church musicians and pastors and laity alike who will be coming together to learn more about what we do when we gather together in worship? What are you looking forward to at the Institute?
It's the people. I just love gathering, across the country and just being in that concentrated time of worship in devotional life. And it's, we're not comparing what's going on. We actually deal with some practical matters, and we just say, yeah, I want to try this. I want to try that. Just opening people to new ideas, or even being reminded of old ideas, because that's an okay thing. Because it's still, Sarah Vaughan, a jazz singer, said there are no such thing as old songs or tired songs. It's just tired singers. So I'm hoping that people don't go away tired. I want people to go away with that old song, with the new take on it.
What are some of the highlights that people can expect to come away with from your keynote? Not giving away all your secrets, but some of the nuggets.
Well, the thing is, keynotes are just to give people a couple of things to consider, to ponder. I'm there to give them a little bit of ideas of what to sing, but I actually think what I'm called to do is how to. Otherwise, they would have chosen somebody else to talk about the what. And also my gearing is as to why do we do this? So I'm asking about why and how to. And so it's going to be about singing. So we're talking about the body as the instrument. Are we going to sing? Am I setting people up to sing better? And then it's about I can't change everybody's ear in two sessions. It's a process. It's not a light switch. So I need to make people aware of those things. So we're going to go through, I have to give people a few patterns to practice. And I'm hoping that they won't be singing too well, because then I'll know what to fix. So if I'm able to work on some technical matters, it's like, okay, here's how we can work on this. But are we really in touch with how we are singing? So that's the part I'm really excited to seeing if people are actually open to that. And I'll know pretty quickly.
Our guest today, Dr. Charles Brown, professor of music and chair of the arts division at Concordia University Chicago. He's also a keynote speaker at the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music, taking place July 9th through the 12th in Seward, Nebraska, hosted by the LCMS Office of National Mission. Dr. Brown, thank you so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour today.
Oh, it was an honor to speak with you again. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You can learn more about the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music, taking place July 9th through the 12th by visiting lcms.org/worship institute. You've been listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support The Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit kfuo.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@kfuo.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.